A desert does not forget. It only waits. For 3 days in the autumn of that year, rain fell over the Lut Desert in southeastern Iran, the kind of rain that the region sees once in a generation. Ancient and merciless, the water tore through the dunes, pulling back the earth like a curtain drawn from a stage, exposing what careful and powerful hands had tried to bury 6 months before. The desert, like truth itself, has its own sense of timing. Khalil Sadeghi was a shepherd. 62 years old, weathered by decades of sun and silence, he guided his flock along an ancient caravan route that morning, the same trail his father had walked and his grandfather before him. His eyes, trained by a lifetime of reading landscapes, caught something wrong in the contours of the sand. A depression where there should have been none. A fragment of fabric catching the pale morning light. His calloused hands brushed away the wet sand slowly, carefully, expecting to find discarded equipment left by oil exploration teams. Instead, his fingers found skin. Cold. Then the unmistakable curve of a human face. Nadia Santos stared up at the vast Iranian sky with lifeless brown eyes. She was 27 years old. Her delicate fingers still clutched desert stones in a final desperate act of survival, an act that had lasted far longer than any human being should ever have to endure alone. Around her neck, a small silver cross on a thin chain caught the morning light like a beacon rising from the earth. Her hands told the whole story. She had clawed at the sand above her own face, fighting for breath, fighting for life, fighting for the child growing inside her, as the desert slowly and deliberately took everything from her. This was not an accident. This was not a disappearance. This was murder dressed in the clothing of silence. If this story moves you, if it makes you think, if it reminds you that every life lost deserves to be remembered, please subscribe to Exposed True Crime Stories. Your subscription is not just a click. It is a vote for truth, for justice, and for the voices that powerful people tried to silence forever. Every subscriber motivates us to keep telling these stories with the care and depth they deserve. 6 months earlier, on the other side of the world from the Lut Desert, Nadia Santos had been very much alive, and very much full of hope. She had arrived in Isfahan, Iran's second-largest city and one of the most breathtaking urban landscapes on Earth, 18 months before her death. Isfahan, with its turquoise domes and ancient bazaars, its bridges arching over the Zayanda River, its half the world squares that had humbled kings and poets for centuries. A city of extraordinary beauty, where history lived in every carved stone and where power had always moved quietly beneath the surface. Nadia came from Cebu, the Philippines. 27 years old. A nursing diploma from Cebu University, a heart full of love for her family, and a desperate need to change the circumstances of people who depended entirely on her. She carried 3 generations on her shoulders. Younger siblings whose school fees she paid, elderly parents whose medication she funded, a home back in Cebu that existed only because she sent money back every month without fail. She kept receipts of every transfer. They covered the wall above her small bed like a testament to sacrifice. Her room in the Hosseini family compound in Isfahan's most exclusive residential district was modest. A single window. A narrow bed. Photographs of her siblings arranged carefully on the shelf. A worn Bible whose pages had been turned so many times the corners had gone soft. These were the artifacts of a life lived entirely for others. But Nadia was not simply a woman of sacrifice. She was also a woman of extraordinary intelligence. She had taught herself Farsi with careful precision in the months before her arrival, studying pronunciation from recordings in the Manila apartment she shared with 3 other nurses preparing for Gulf postings. She spoke it now with an accent that charmed the Hosseini household, while concealing, with deliberate modesty, the depth of her education and capability. Her nursing background made her quietly indispensable. She managed the family matriarch's anxiety medications, monitored the elderly grandfather's diabetic condition with professional-grade care, and had become woven into the fabric of the family's daily life in ways that no one had anticipated when they hired her as a domestic worker. She was invisible in the way that powerful families prefer their staff to be invisible. Until the moment she wasn't. To understand what happened to Nadia Santos, you must first understand the world she entered. The Hosseini family of Isfahan was not merely wealthy. They were the kind of wealthy that reshapes economies, that moves through government corridors without knocking, that negotiates oil contracts over private dinners where the waitstaff do not exist as human beings but as furniture. Bahram Hosseini, 57 years old, had built his empire across 3 decades of strategic marriages, petroleum partnerships, and the quiet accumulation of political debt from men who owed him favors they could never fully repay. The Hosseini compound in Isfahan's northern quarter was a monument to that power. Italian marble. Persian carpets worth millions laid across floors that almost no one outside the family ever walked. Gold fixtures catching the filtered light of latticed windows that had been designed by an architect brought in from Milan. Every detail whispered the same message, that this family had arrived, that they had always been here, and that they intended to remain. Fariba Hosseini, Bahram's wife, was perhaps the most dangerous person in the house, though no one who attended her charity luncheons for the wives of Isfahan's prominent families would have believed it. She was Sorbonne educated with a degree in international relations, fluent in 4 languages, the director of a foundation with a $50 million endowment. She moved through elite society with the precision of someone who had long understood that reputation was not merely important, it was everything. In a city and a culture where family honor functioned as social currency, she had become a master economist. She also maintained, quietly and efficiently, one of the most sophisticated informal surveillance networks in Isfahan's wealthy residential circles. Housekeepers across the district reported to her. Security guards shared information. She knew at any given moment exactly what was happening in the houses around her, and therefore, exactly what threats were forming against the one thing she valued above all else: the Hosseini name. Their son, Dariush Hosseini, was 31 years old, Oxford-educated in international business and petroleum engineering. He possessed the kind of natural charisma that closed deals in boardrooms and charmed dignitaries at state dinners. He was handsome in the particular way that men born into power often are, confidently, carelessly, as though beauty were simply another inheritance. He was engaged to his cousin Shirin, a union arranged not from sentiment but from mathematics. The marriage would cement oil concessions spanning 3 provinces. It would lock in political alliances that reached from Isfahan to Tehran and beyond. It was, at its core, a multi-billion-dollar merger disguised as tradition. Into this world, Nadia Santos had walked carrying a nursing bag and a heart still open enough to believe that people were fundamentally good. The attraction between Dariush and Nadia did not begin in any dramatic or calculated way. It began during a medical emergency. Bahram's elderly sister, Maryam, suffered a severe diabetic crisis during a family gathering where international business partners had been invited. She collapsed. The room froze. And while the powerful men and elegant women stood in suspended horror, Nadia moved. She recognized the symptoms immediately. She administered emergency glucose from the medical kit she always kept nearby for the grandfather's care. She spoke calmly, clearly, and with the authority of someone who had trained for exactly this moment, who had practiced this scenario in hospital corridors in Cebu while dreaming of a career she had not yet been able to build. She stabilized Miriam's condition before the paramedics arrived. The room watched. And across the chaos of that gathering, Dariush Hosseini saw Nadia Santos. Truly saw her, for the first time. He saw not the uniform. Not the invisible domestic worker moving through spaces designed to remind her of her station. He saw her intelligence, her calm, her competence, and something in him shifted in a way he would not be able to unshift. 3 days later, long after midnight, he found her in the family library. She was reading classical Persian poetry while sitting near the elderly grandfather she was monitoring through the night. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before he said anything. When he finally spoke, it was to ask her what she thought of Hafez. She answered with a passage from memory. He sat down. That was the beginning. Their conversations in the midnight library grew longer, deeper, and more honest than anything Dariush had ever experienced in a life surrounded by people whose honesty was always calibrated against what they needed from the Hosseini name. Nadia spoke to him as a person. She told him about her siblings, about the nursing school she hoped to return to one day, about the clinic she dreamed of building in a remote province of the Philippines where people died from treatable conditions because no one had ever thought their lives were worth funding. Dariush spoke to her about the weight of expectation, the suffocating mathematics of inheriting a dynasty, of never having made a single major choice in his life that was truly his own. They recognized something in each other that they had not expected to find. And they were not careful enough. The relationship deepened through stolen hours and places where surveillance could not reach. Service corridors. Garden paths obscured by cypress trees. A family beach property near the city's outskirts where Nadia's absence during Fariba's charity gatherings went unnoticed in the choreography of catering 20 prominent guests. Ancient hunting lodges in the foothills outside Isfahan where they drove through empty highways under a sky dense with stars, where Dariush spoke of leaving Iran, of building a life in Europe where neither of them would owe their existence to a family name or a petroleum contract. Nadia allowed herself in those hours to believe in a different future. Not just the future of money sent home, of siblings educated, of parents kept comfortable. A future that was hers. A clinic. A life. A man who looked at her and saw exactly who she was. But the mathematics of her situation were always present, even in those stolen hours, calculated in the back of her mind with the precision of a woman who understood exactly how vulnerable she was. Foreign domestic workers caught in romantic relationships with the families they served faced immediate deportation under Iranian labor frameworks. Her visa existed at the Hosseini family's pleasure, renewable annually based on performance reviews that could be turned into weapons of character destruction with a single phone call. One accusation of inappropriate behavior would not merely end her career. It would end her siblings' education, her parents' medical care, her entire future in any Gulf or regional country where background checks circulated quietly among the families that hired women like her. She understood the cage. She had understood it since the day she arrived. What she had not understood was how quickly it could be locked. Because by the third month of their relationship, Nadia Santos discovered she was pregnant. The irony was bitter and precise. Her nursing training made denial impossible. Morning sickness struck during breakfast preparation, forcing her to disguise nausea as a reaction to kitchen fumes. She began wearing looser uniforms. She adjusted her schedule to avoid the family's attention during vulnerable moments. She researched her options with growing desperation and found that every door was closed. Unmarried pregnancy meant immediate deportation. Termination procedures required male guardian consent she could not obtain. International medical alternatives were financially impossible. The black market carried risks of death or imprisonment that terrified her more than any other outcome. She was carrying life, and she was trapped. Fariba Hosseini noticed the change in Nadia before anyone else did. Of course she did. She had been watching domestic workers navigate this household for 20 years. She recognized the slightly altered posture, the fuller cheeks, the way Nadia had quietly replaced her morning cup of strong Persian tea with plain warm water. The hand placed unconsciously over the lower abdomen during moments of stillness. The nausea disguised as kitchen fatigue. During a morning briefing about the grandfather's medications, Fariba looked at Nadia with eyes that functioned less like eyes and more like instruments of surgical analysis. "You look tired," she said with careful warmth. "The family doctor is very thorough. We should arrange a comprehensive examination for all household staff." The intelligence network activated immediately after that. Kitchen staff reported Nadia's altered eating patterns. Security guard Reza documented movement discrepancies during evening hours, gaps in surveillance coverage that coincided with Daryush's claimed solitary walks. Housekeeper Zura noted expensive cologne lingering in service corridors where only domestic staff were meant to pass. Perimeter cameras at the family property had captured, without any of them knowing, the silhouettes of two figures walking together in restricted areas. Bahram received the preliminary dossier during his Thursday morning security briefing, a ritual where potential threats to family reputation were cataloged and addressed with the same cold efficiency he brought to quarterly revenue reviews. The photographs, the timestamp analysis, the testimony of staff members whose accounts aligned into a pattern that left no room for doubt. His response was immediate. Phone calls to Shiren's father, Daryush's betrothed, revealed growing anxiety about wedding delays. Political allies had begun expressing concern about Hosseini family stability. Most critically, 3 of their major energy contracts contained morality clauses. A family scandal of this nature, exposed in the wrong way, could trigger terminations worth hundreds of billions of rials in lost concessions. The Hosseini Empire had survived 3 generations of political upheaval, economic sanctions, and global energy volatility. It would not be brought down by a Filipino domestic worker and an inconvenient pregnancy. Bahram summoned Daryush through formal channels, not a family conversation, but official correspondence that arrived through a legal secretary, delivered to his private office, stamped with the formality of a business ultimatum. The meeting took place in Bahram's private study, surrounded by framed photographs of oil ministers and infrastructure partners whose relationships depended entirely on the Hosseini name meaning something reliable and untarnished. "You will end this immediately," Bahram said. No preamble. No fatherly warmth. "The girl's pregnancy threatens everything we have built across 3 generations. This is not negotiable. The child does not come into the world. The girl disappears. And your engagement to Shiren proceeds on the schedule that was set." Daryush made desperate calculations. He contacted European lawyers in coffee shops far from family surveillance. He researched international frameworks and found that Iranian family law offered no protection for foreign domestic workers in relationships with local nationals. and that fleeing the country would mean abandoning an inheritance worth billions while facing potential criminal charges under cultural protection statutes. Every door he pushed against was locked. Fariba moved with precision to confirm what the surveillance had already established. The family physician, Dr. Farhad Karimi, had served the Hosseinis for over 20 years. He understood which examination results required discreet handling and which discoveries never appeared in official records. Nadia's examination confirmed the pregnancy. 13 weeks. 2 lives. Strategic planning began immediately. Phone calls were placed to security contractors who specialized in complications requiring permanent resolution. Bahram delivered his final instruction to his son with the tone of a man closing a business meeting. Dariush's protests were dismissed as the romantic indulgences of a man who had not yet fully understood what he had been born into, and what he therefore owed. Meanwhile, Nadia began to understand that the atmosphere in the house had shifted into something that felt like a predator pausing before it moved. Her passport disappeared from her locked drawer. Staff members stopped meeting her eyes. Her phone calls to the Philippine consulate were met with appointment scheduling that placed any real assistance weeks in the future. Her attempt to reach the airport was intercepted by security personnel who arrived at the taxi stand with official-looking documentation claiming she was needed for immediate questioning about visa irregularities. She borrowed a phone from a sympathetic kitchen worker and hid among the garden's cypress trees to make one final call to her sister Clara in Cebu. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the hollow quality of someone saying goodbye without being able to say it directly. "If something happens to me," she whispered in Tagalog, "remember that I loved all of you more than my own life. The baby deserves to be remembered, even if we cannot be saved." Fariba's voice was warm and maternal when she informed Nadia about the mandatory health examination. "The family clinic provides the best prenatal care in Isfahan," she said with a smile arranged to project genuine concern. "Dr. Karimi wants to ensure that both you and the baby are receiving proper care." Official paperwork was presented. Clinic letterheads. Government stamps suggesting routine compliance with labor regulations. It was masterfully constructed, a deception designed to appeal to the precise thing that Nadia had been most desperate for throughout her entire ordeal. Medical attention. Safety. Someone taking care of her and her child. Her relief overrode every instinct she had. 2 distant Hosseini relatives, Sharam and Kamais, arrived before dawn in a white Toyota Land Cruiser fitted with false medical transport plates. These men existed on the periphery of the family's wealth, second cousins whose financial failures had made them entirely dependent on Bahram's goodwill. Their loyalty had been purchased through threats and promises. Handle this quietly or face bankruptcy and permanent exile from the tribal protection that kept them from ruin. The vehicle had been prepared with the thoroughness of people who had thought through consequences. GPS tracking disabled. Registration plates replaced with duplicates traceable to a rental company that would report them stolen within hours. Interior surfaces treated with bleach. Industrial plastic sheeting protecting the seats. Nadia climbed into the back seat wearing her best dress, a modest blue outfit she had bought for church attendance and special occasions. Her small purse held her rosary, prenatal vitamins she had bought secretly, and photographs of her siblings. She carried hope with her into that vehicle. She should have carried a weapon. The drive began through Isfahan's gleaming morning streets, past the ancient bazaars and the blue-domed mosques and the bridge over the Zayanda River where lovers walked on Friday evenings. Then the streets gave way to industrial zones. Then to empty highway. Then to the open, silent, enormous nothing of the desert. "Where is this clinic?" she asked. "Specialized facility," Sharam said without turning. "Privacy is essential for family medical matters." She tried to run at a roadside stop. She bolted toward the highway, screaming for help from passing vehicles that accelerated past the scene. Past a foreign woman and 2 local men, past something that looked like a domestic dispute and therefore like someone else's problem. She was caught, restrained, and the last pretense dissolved. This was not a medical appointment. This was never going to be a medical appointment. The site had been chosen with care. 40 kilometers from the nearest paved road. A terrain where emergency cell signals could not penetrate. A natural formation of rock that blocked satellite surveillance from above. A location so remote that the nearest human presence on most days was Khalil Sadeghi's flock, and Khalil would not pass through for another 6 months. The shallow grave had been dug 2 days earlier. Stones gathered from the surrounding area were ready to be placed as natural-looking concealment. The dimensions had been calculated. Nadia pleaded until the end. She offered silence, absolute, permanent, unconditional silence about everything she knew. She offered to disappear voluntarily to any country they named, any city in the world, with nothing. She begged for the life of her child, even if her own could not be spared. Her voice echoed across a desert that had swallowed the secrets of tribal conflicts and family honor across centuries of human cruelty. Shahram and Kamais wore body cameras that night. Not out of sentiment, but out of institutional calculation. Evidence of completion for family archives, and insurance against the possibility that either of them might later seek leverage over the people who had sent them. Those body cameras recorded everything. They recorded Nadia's final prayer, spoken in Tagalog into the cold desert air, asking forgiveness for whatever sins had brought her to this moment and protection for the baby she would never hold. They recorded what happened next. She was buried alive. Sand and stones covered her face while she was still breathing, while she was still fighting, while her hands, the same hands that had stabilized Miriam during her diabetic crisis, the same hands that had arranged the photographs of her siblings above her narrow bed in that small room, clawed at the earth above her mouth and nose, fighting for air that came in shorter and shorter gasps until the desert finally, mercilessly, took her. The vehicle was driven to an industrial facility outside Isfahan and reduced to ash. Tools were scattered across multiple locations across the province. Nadia's room was cleaned by professionals who specialized in this kind of erasure. Her photographs and her Bible were incinerated. Her remaining belongings were moved into black market channels. A false missing person report described a domestic worker who had violated her visa terms and departed voluntarily for an undisclosed destination. False witnesses placed her at the airport with luggage. Within 48 hours, the Hosseini household had resumed normal operations. Dariush flew to Europe on business. Fariba returned to her charity luncheons. The engagement ceremony was moved forward by 2 weeks. When Khalil Sadeghi called the emergency line that morning, the desk sergeant's initial response was bureaucratic indifference. A nomadic shepherd reporting a desert find. Most likely abandoned equipment. Someone would be sent on Monday. But the forensic photographer who arrived first was a man named Hassan Ahmadi, and Hassan Ahmadi was meticulous. His documentation revealed fingernails containing sand mixed with the woman's own blood. Clothing patterns indicating burial in personal dress rather than wrapped in preparation. And an autopsy that revealed something that transformed a routine disposal case into something that made the entire team fall silent. 13 weeks pregnant. 2 lives. Not one. The leaked forensic photographs reached international human rights organizations within days. The image of Nadia's silver cross clutched in death-stiffened fingers became a symbol that traveled across social media platforms in Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas with the speed and force of moral outrage that has somewhere real to land. The hashtag Justice for Nadia reached trending status across the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and dozens of other countries where millions of workers lived under similar vulnerabilities. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. demanded justice through diplomatic channels that threatened bilateral trade relationships worth billions in overseas worker remittances. Ambassador Rosa Bautista's presentations to international forums documented systematic patterns of abuse that implicated governmental complicity through inadequate protection frameworks. The breakthrough came from Reza, a security operative who had moved from household surveillance into the family's more private contracting work, and whose conscience had been losing ground to sleep deprivation and a recurring nightmare that played the body camera footage on a loop he could not stop. He had kept the files as insurance. He had also, over 6 months, been destroyed by them. He surrendered the footage. All of it. GPS tracking data confirming the family vehicle's route to the execution site. Audio of Nadia's final prayers. Visual documentation of live burial that left no room for alternative interpretation. Dariush's psychological collapse came during his 3rd interrogation, when investigators placed the body camera footage and the ultrasound images of his unborn child on the table in front of him simultaneously. His confession detailed the ultimatum, the impossibility of his choices, the moments where he had told himself he would find another way right up until there was no time left and another way had never materialized. "I should have died with her," he said into the recording equipment. "Every breath I take is stolen from the life she should have lived." The trial drew international observers from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and UN special rapporteurs monitoring extrajudicial killings. Isfahan's courtroom became a stage where the accumulated silence of decades of similar crimes was finally forced to speak. Bahram Hosseini received life imprisonment for ordering the execution. His oil empire was transferred to government oversight pending asset recovery for victim compensation. Fariba Hosseini received a 25-year sentence for conspiracy and evidence tampering. Shahram and Kamiz were sentenced to death for murder and live burial. Dariush received a 15-year sentence. His cooperation with investigators weighed against his role in enabling the destruction of the woman and the child he had claimed to love. The Hosseini business empire collapsed under the combined weight of legal proceedings and reputational destruction. Oil concessions were redistributed. Political alliances dissolved as former partners sought visible distance from convicted murderers. Nadia's sister, Clara Santos, established the Nadia Santos Foundation in Isfahan, providing legal assistance and emergency shelter for domestic workers facing abuse or trafficking. Every year, on the morning that Khalil Sadeghi found her in the sand, the foundation holds a desert memorial service at the marked grave in the Lut Desert where Nadia and her unborn child rest together. The memorial stone bears inscriptions in Farsi, English, and Tagalog. Because she belonged to all of them, to everyone who has ever worked far from home, carrying people they love on their back, believing that the world would protect them if they only worked hard enough and stayed invisible enough and never asked for too much. In the Lut Desert, the sunrise is extraordinary. Ancient light falling across ancient sand. And somewhere beneath it, a woman who clawed at the earth with everything she had, not for herself but for a child, for 3 siblings, for parents, for a dream of a clinic in a remote Philippine province where people were dying from things that could be treated. The desert did not protect her, but it remembered her. And in the end, so did the world. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe to Exposed True Crime Stories. We do this work because the Nadias of this world deserve more than a shallow grave in silence. Your subscription tells us that you believe that too, and it gives us the strength to keep going, to keep digging, and to keep giving the forgotten a voice. Thank you for watching.